Today is Friday, July 22nd, and this is the 10 o'clock meeting for the Capital Outlay Committee at the Griffin Room. And can we just introduce yourselves and we go around?
Sure, Mark Kelleher.
Karen Doucette.
Rich Larius.
Bob Osworth.
Martha Donovan.
And I'd like to take it, the time and give it over to our town administrator, Joe Power.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Capital Outlay Committee. I am thrilled to present to you folks formally and finally our newest employee, the Finance Director, Town Accountant, Anne Marie Ellis, who comes to us immediately from the town of Yarmouth, has an exceptional background in municipal finance, and that's all I'm going to say about her, because I'm going to force her to talk now by shutting up, which is remarkable for me.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
And so I've already prepped our finance director, talking about who the five of you are as representatives and members of the Capital Outlay Committee. And Mr. Chairman, as we've talked before, Selectmen's Ballantyne and Kavanaugh are aware that the Board of Selectmen have an appointee, so they're going to take that up as the interview committee. And
Excuse me. I'll close it, Rich. I'll close it.
And I've already reached out to the vice chair of the planning board, because that other representative is someone to be identified by the planning board for a representative. So I'm very hopeful that this committee will be fully composed with members before Labor Day. So with that, Mr. Chairman, on your agenda, I know you have two items that I said probably wouldn't be considered new business, but regardless, and I know your colleagues on your left met last night as Finance Committee. Chair Peter Hughes confirmed for me this morning, and I have in your packet the key dates for the planning of the 2023 annual town meeting. And I'd like to go through that this morning. And then the next item is to tie one of the calendar deliverables as it is currently working through the department head process. So first, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as you have discovered with me, today represents 283 days before the 2023 annual town meeting. I do that all the time, whether people like it or not. And so you can see that the key dates calendar also ties to that drawing down calendar, for lack of a better word. This is a calendar that I presented formally to the Board of Selectmen on July 11th. The board endorsed it as all the dates you see there. If I could ask you to draw your attention towards the bottom of the page, where you can see 58 days and 53 days prior to town meeting. Those were two dates that both of the dates conform, or excuse me, relate to the Finance Committee. So that's why Chair Peter Hughes was going to cover that with his committee. They did that last night. So I'm pleased to be able to formally announce through this group, and we'll do it again Monday evening at the board meeting, that the town's traditional or customary, as you can see the governance reference I use, round robin all day budget effort is scheduled for Saturday, March 4th, 2023. And so again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the purpose of this key dates calendar, as you can see, is to expedite many of the governed requirements, that is to say, required more often than not by charter, or in some instances by bylaw, but these are my statutory, or the town statutory, of which I'm a part, obligations on building the 2023 annual town meeting warrant and operating budget. So I think it's fantastic that we can say in July of '22 that we will, all weather permitting, who can think of snow right now, but I'd like to this weekend. All things being equal, we will have that all-day event on Saturday, March 4th. And then Finance Committee and Chair Hughes are availing themselves of the proposed date. As you may know, the charter requires the Finance Committee to hold at least one public hearing. And so that public hearing is scheduled for the Finance Committee's following meeting after the round-robin budget hearing on Thursday, March 9th. So it's great to have those dates solidified. And again, Board of Selectmen and FinCom are now aware of those, and hopefully everybody has those on their calendars. Going back then to the top, you can see that when I had a department head meeting Last Thursday, I rolled out the key dates calendar and also the documents that you'll see under your next agenda topic. I've given department heads a deliverable of giving preliminary information on operating budget, community preservation articles, warrant articles, and capital outlay submissions due back to me by close of business on August 31st, 2022. Between now and then, there'll be another department head meeting where Anne Marie and I and the group will go through all the documents. Mr. Chairman, I saw you signal, so I'm going to take a breath, take a sip, and answer any questions you may have.
I just wanted to make a comment, and I wanted to thank Peter Hughes for inviting me to last night's meeting at least 3 weeks ago. I didn't think this committee was ready to add any value in terms of what are the dates, where are we going, what are some of the requests, and at Peter's request to work together. And everything that you've done sort of solidifies the fact that I wasn't ready,
Sure.
nor was this committee ready.
Sure.
We needed what you presented. We needed that August 31st date as a start date to perhaps let FinCom know that we have 45 requests for $40 million. And as you said last week, we still don't know what is the number we're shooting for.
Right.
Is it 17 million? Is it 5 million? 2 million? We don't know. So I appreciate Peter's offer, and we hope to work with him
Excellent.
as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Peter.
And then for you folks, jump down to the middle of the page, more or less, where, as you know, the charter under Chapter 9, which is the financial chapter, you folks, in concert with me as the builder, so to speak, have an obligation under the charter to meet jointly with the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee. And Mr. Chairman, working with you and your calendar, that date is now set for the board's second meeting in December. So that would be Monday, December 12th, 2022, and a nice tidy 140 days before town meeting, where capital outlay will meet jointly with the Board of Selectmen and FinCom, and we will review the draft capital outlay plan and budget for the next 5 years, and also immediately for fiscal year 2024.
I have a question. Do you have a date for when, after the August 31st date, when you will present the warrants to this committee?
Now, when you
So
say,
for
when you say
capital outlay-
warrants, do you mean,
Or the articles, whatever people submit for preliminary warrants. So if those are due to you by the end of August, and then the capital outlay committee, as I understand it, we have between September and December 12th
Yep.
to get our stuff together and to meet with department heads and do all that stuff, to review all that stuff and get a perspective. So when will you have the list to us?
so, if I may, Mr. Chairman, through you, I know that your last meeting of the summer months is scheduled for August 19th. And so, what I would like to do by that meeting is have a sense from you folks of your meeting schedule for the fall, leading into that December deliverable, knowing that at your first meeting, presumably in September, is when I would roll out all of the preliminary requests that we have.
Yeah, we
And I'm
talked-
also gonna cover that under the next topic as we go through the forms
Oh, okay, cool.
that they're gonna submit.
Yeah, that's great, Joe. So I think we talked about Fridays and starting in September, Friday
Yep,
mornings.
Excellent.
Okay.
Joe,
thank
as an aside, this operating calendar per se, okay? This. And department head. One committee that, we're talking about 3 entities here, meaning capital outlay, FinCom, and the Board of Selectmen.
Mhm.
You and I attended a meeting about a month ago with the Charter Bylaw Committee.
Mhm.
Will that have any effect on what we're trying to achieve? The 3 of us, the 3 entities are trying to achieve. Is there any repercussions, or is there any outstanding issues that we should know, the committee should know about.
Sure.
You and I have discussed this because we attended the meeting.
So, at the risk of exposing myself as an eternal optimist, I do not believe so.
Okay.
However, to that question, I have been participating in every one of the bylaw charter review committees that they've had since the conclusion of the annual town meeting. I believe there's an early August meeting where we're gonna go back to it. And really, the effort now has, we started with the capital outlay component of Chapter 9 of the charter, but now we're actually doing a deeper dive into everything in the charter. You know, my first eye is on the financial-related matters, because I've always said, and it's the reason why I track the dates, for me, there's nothing more important for a town than its annual town meeting. And so that's why the emphasis has been on that. But I think there's a very collaborative environment between bylaw charter review, certainly to me, and reciprocated to them. And at some point, I've told that committee that they should really get in front of the Board of Selectmen, or have the board get in front of them, so that those two parties can go. But I do not foresee any issues on the, what I still know to be issues on the charter that relate to capital, especially the amendment concept. I don't expect there to be a problem. I think there's a general understanding that everybody knows that there are mixed messages in the charter, but everyone is acting in good faith, if I could use that labor term. And so I do not expect any pitfalls, but who knows? It's town meeting process.
Okay.
Will there potentially be proposed changes at the town meeting related to the charter and the?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
Right now, the question is, how comprehensive?
Right, okay.
Quick question, Rich.
Sure.
Is it on August 31st, we'll get a sense of what the capital costs are gonna be involved with Sisson Road, the input from Sean Livy, roof, furnace, when will that come, and we'll?
So, yes, and I'll say it this way, any capital needs for any municipal buildings, including 204 Sisson Road, should be coming out through this process. What I want to emphasize is in fairness to the department heads and the committee chairs, I've used the phrase preliminary, because what we're engaged in right now is far earlier than we've ever done, and is meant first to exceed any of the governance references that you see on the table there that relate to the charter, to be well in advance. But I do recognize that we have our new finance director sitting next to me. There is a outdated charter reference. I'm gonna try not to scare you on live television. But it talks about the fact that where I have to do, you can see 224 days before town meeting, I have to present a current financial assessment. So that current financial assessment is in the middle of the first quarter of the present fiscal year. And I'm trying to give an assessment of how it's looking for the next fiscal year. My colleague has an obligation under the charter, and by October 1st, to provide the first quarter report. Now, I'd like to say it first before Anne Marie even has to. It's not possible to report out Q1 on October 1st, which is literally the day after quarter, or the day after quarter end. And generally speaking, she should be offered the opportunity of several weeks. So there's still that disconnect of, yep, we're gonna build this. So everything that I'm talking about for August is meant to be preliminary. Things are going to happen after the summer ends, as we get into the fall, as we get better revenue projections, and as anything else happens in the external influencers, Mass DEP being one of them, that we'd have to readjust. So preliminary information coming by the end of August, shared with you folks at your next meeting in September, and away we go.
Let me make a point, or, since this committee made up of 5 of us, 4 of us have never gone through this process before, so we joined the finance director in an effort to achieve some kind of success. What I'm concerned about is, Mark, that not every request is approved. So, so that we can get our mindset. Sean might have 17 programs that he's working on, and we will evaluate in terms of priority, does it make it or not, in this year's plan. So I'm not picking on 204 Sisson Road, but since we brought it up, I don't know how that fits in this year's plan. I know that the FinCom has been working on it and looking at it, and Karen has done extensive analyses. But it's up to Sean to show that it's an important piece of his program.
So to that point in process, so what the department heads put in, their very first request, is that what we will see? Or will you go through it with them first and start to narrow it down before we see
They
it?
come to us.
Okay,
I'm
as
sorry.
originally requested. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, through you, and not in an effort to refute what you just said, no, it is not my intent to edit or amend their documents. However, please don't lose sight of the fact that the department heads, as my direct reports, also have goals and objections. Excuse me.
Probably do
Freudian slip.
have objections.
Yeah, exactly. It's
okay.
Freudian slip, sorry about that. Goals and objectives. But I've also talked about, for me, what a department head is. And a big part of their evaluation centers on budgeting, project management, procurement. My intent is for this process to remain transparent, so that whatever's presented to me, even though I'm not a public body, will first be shared with this public body in a public manner. But I cannot and will not, abrogate my responsibilities as their boss and as the agent of the board.
Right.
But I do want you folks to have all the information that I have.
Right.
Because again, the charter requires us to work symbiotically, where I have an obligation and a responsibility to the capital plan, and the charter requires you folks to help me. And so the only way we do that is with that transparency.
Right.
What I've told department heads is, we are resuming our monthly department head meetings. That may bump up to more than once a month as we get into this process in the fall. And that, as the chair has said, I'm gonna have to do a lot of prioritizing. I'm gonna have to rely upon my colleague for revenue statements and just, strategic planning.
And how we
But the
finance it.
intent is always, whatever forms are created are public and are certainly first shared with you folks.
Okay, thank you.
And that's where the fall activity for
Right,
us
right,
basically
right.
starts. And we're looking at, to complete all department heads, which will come in multiple groups and individually as a multiple group. And hopefully, we will get that done in 2.5 weeks. So we are set in terms of, we've met the requirement, meeting the department heads, finding out what their requests are, taking a vote, see how we feel about the request. Does it fit in financially? Does it fit in operationally? So that's where we're gonna be in September, starting. I mean, it's
And the
right in
goal-
line, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, and the goal is that, in terms of priorities, that by the time it gets to the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board, they're not gonna be surprised. The priorities aren't gonna be different from sort of what they're thinking,
Correct,
because you're gonna influence
correct, that's the intent,
priorities.
exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
I have a question.
Bob.
Joe, on the priorities for the request forms,
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, I believe we're now going to item B, which I'm ready for. Is that what you're talking about? the
well,
forms
yeah,
in the
I was
packet?
just gonna ask, and you can answer this later in your remarks. Is your message basically for the department heads to now narrow it down to 1 and 2, as far as the reasons for the priority?
Thank you. First, if I could, very quickly, Mr. Chairman, identify for your benefit, but also for the potential viewing audience. So what I've shared with you under item B is the fillable capital outlay submittal form. And for any of you, so I know FinCom members last year saw some version of it. You folks saw some version of it this past winter. I've reformatted the Division of Local Services fillable form to now have our own fillable form, because I was able to take out those embedded misspellings, which were driving me crazy. But to Bob's question, When you look at the submittal form, you can see that there's a box called asset category, and it's a drop-down box, and what you have on the second page is the list of those drop-down items. I will tell you that one other change that occurred is I removed any reference to other, because other strikes me as miscellaneous, and miscellaneous is dangerous. To Bob's question, there are 4 priorities. Legally required is number 1, number 2 is essential, number 3 is an enhancement, and number 4 is desirable. What I told department heads was, if it's desirable, thank you so much. Moving on.
If you hit the lottery,
Exactly,
Well,
exactly, yep.
self-funded.
But if I can build off of that question, Bob, because I think it's a very good one. You know, you folks may recall, we save energy, lights are dimming. Maybe if I speak up or stand up, the lights go back. If memory serves correctly, the DPW director had a desirable priority, and it was related to the DPW barn. You know, they desire an upgrade to that building. To me, that's not a desire, that's going to become a need. And so, you know, Link will tell you that he's had it on previous year's plans, and it goes back to the concept of our buildings, there we go. And that is, all of these buildings have to fit in. And so, to me, desirable is meant to be, all things being equal, wouldn't it be great if we could do X? Having said that, legally required is gonna get everybody's attention, and essential, you know, okay, department heads or submitter, tell me why it's essential versus an enhancement.
So,
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say enhancement can be essential versus desirable, so to me, that's not even a good category for a priority. Cause you got enhancements for a purpose and a purpose is an enhancement, but it's not really a priority, but.
So, and to that end, what I should have mentioned also is that the form and the categories come from the Division of Local Services. And the only reason I say that is, given how shaky Chapter 9 is in the charter, I've already told, the chair and I presented to the Bylaw Charter Review Committee, you know, and they've got ownership, for lack of a better word, of the charter, given their charge, but they were very agreeable, because what I've said is, and it's a conversation I'll have more in depth with Anne Marie, but for me, when the Department of Revenue for the Commonwealth, acting through the Division of Local Services, says this is a best practice,
Yeah.
that's why I want to grab that. But now that the form is modifiable, I hope over time, we continue to refine it to be more accurate for Harwich.
Yeah, my first question for anything that's an enhancement would be, is it essential or desirable?
Yep, right, exactly, yep.
'Cause
But I am hoping that these categories, or these list of statements, as I've really called it, you know, really do spur the requester to think about that. And to that end, I also want to tell you that I admitted to the department heads, excuse me, there is one element in the fillable form that's missing from last year, and that was, if you remember, the DLS said, last but not least, if you're submitting this capital request, for the next 3 fiscal years, what effect, positive or negative, is that going to have on your expense line item? And what effect over the next 3 fiscal years, positive or negative, is that going to have on your personnel line item? And I told the group that I was striving for a one-pager. And so I omitted that in the short term. Excuse me. But I've said to the department heads, don't lose sight of that question. That's an excellent question for me. That challenges us to say, well, wait a second. You know, if you think of a capital outlay item, say as a massive piece of machinery. So on the expense side, the question might be, well, have we factored in an increase in diesel fuel? Have we factored in an increase for maintenance and parts and accessories or whatever that may be? Conversely, have we factored in, is there somebody on staff that is certified or licensed to operate that machinery? And then last but not least on the personnel, you know, I'm fond of the old, I think it was Americana tale of the guy with the steam hammer, you know, which was better, the steam hammer or the guy with the pickaxe, meaning does this new equipment potentially eliminate the need for 3 positions? You know, what is going to be the effect? Because we know, and I don't know that we've challenged ourselves to that level, but I think we need to. If we bring in, if we make these commitments, and again, capital outlay commitments are meant to be of a larger item for a finite period of time, what's that gonna do to the other line items? And that impacts directly on the operating budget process, because now capital purchase impacts upon salary and wages, or could impact upon expenses line item. And so, although that's omitted in its present form, I've warned the folks that I might re-engineer it and find a way to either make it a double-sided form or cram that in there. But whether it appears there or not, I'm gonna challenge department heads to think about that, and I would urge you folks to do the same as you do your evaluation.
Good ideas.
Joe, let me ask a question. There's, the category being there called desirable, okay? If it didn't make sense, it wouldn't be listed.
Correct.
I would think, I mean, this idea of discussing what desirable is, I would think from a political angle, or for best interest, there may be a project or two that would be desirable, and it would be politically correct to put it on as a project to satisfy those constituents that feel that it's really important, and that we are not overlooking a request that, in essence, we know we're not gonna fund, but in essence, our residents feel that it's important that we have looked at it. And I think by categorizing it desirable means if we had the money, we would do it. So I don't want it to be projected that we may see 1 or 2 desirable requests and not consider them seriously.
I think we should consider all requests, but if there's a political decision to be made, it goes to the Board of Selectmen.
No,
That's
no.
what I would think, but.
no, I think there are requests that are gonna come through us that we may be categorized as desirable, that in fact we don't fund, but we in fact accept it, that we looked at it, and it is desirable.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna look at every one though, aren't we?
Well, the question is we're looking at every one, the question is whether we fund it or not, but I think we should not eliminate projects that are being developed on paper by department heads, and they know it's really desirable, so they don't put it on.
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, I think we should just look at everything that gets submitted.
Well, we should, that's it, and it's the we level. The question or the point that I'm trying to make is, at the department head level, I don't want them to eliminate a desirable request, knowing that in fact, it's not gonna make the cut.
Got it.
But the fact is, to satisfy that department head, and if he is not, I'm not using the term influenced, but if he is aware of something, I don't know, some department head finds out that there's a neighborhood that needs a fence, and politically, it'd be great if we put the fence up because it divides, whatever. And there's lobbying per se by the residents or by a constituent that this fence should. I don't want it to be laughed off, and I don't want it to be considered inappropriate, and I don't want it to be considered not inputable.
Oh, I agree.
You know, and I just want to make it aware that if something comes up and it is really desirable, it should be on a request form. That's all I'm saying. Yes.
Follow-up question based on that. Who would signify in the priority list where those requests fall under? Is it the department head? Is it with your input? Who basically would say that, I mean, I think legally required is pretty obvious, but, someone might think of something as essential versus an enhancement. Who Or what's the process for figuring out 1, 2, 3, and 4 on those forms?
So initially, all of that is determined by the requestor, who would more often than not be a department head.
Okay.
And then to your point, like I said, we've got the department head meeting, I think it's August 17th, if memory serves correctly, 2 weeks before the deadline. We'll have a discussion as a group, the question may come up, and what I would say is, I'm relying upon department heads as subject matter experts and leaders for them to go through their processes and for them to make the compelling arguments. So they would need to make these choices up front. They submit them on the 31st. I'm gonna go through them for sure, but I'm not gonna do any work on them until you folks meet jointly. Excuse me, not jointly, but you folks meet first. And then we talk about it, and then I think the next steps would be bring in those department heads and have them explain to both parties what they were thinking.
Okay.
That's a normal PMO kind of thing, yeah.
Exactly, yep.
I'm just,
Can I ask one question on the form? I see here the question, are other revenues available, grants or municipal funds? So you're just asking the department heads, is there any other way to finance this than using our operating budget?
Correct, and when you look at the original form, it's actually a little bit daunting, because the original form from DLS says, aside from levy sources, stabilization, or free cash.
Right. And so, you're the one that decides, once we get, sort of a refined list, in conjunction, I'm assuming with Anne Marie, how you finance it. Is that where that, is it?
Generally speaking,
Free
yes, that's how we've done it in
cash
the past, correct,
Okay,
yep.
Okay.
I guess what I would want to put out there is, in the end, for better or for worse, the charter, both under Chapter 4, Town Administrator, Chapter 5, Reorganization, Chapter 9, and last but not least, my job description, puts the onus on me as the owner for all of these decisions to then get it to the political, or not political, let me strike that, the elected officials, the folks that the voters put in charge, for them to then adopt or move forward.
I've always, and I'm gonna keep saying this, so I'm sorry, I'm gonna kinda, I mean, it's just me, because I'm new. I feel like I don't have an understanding of sort of our debt situation, so when we're doing this and we get to that point, understanding how I get free cash and all that kind of stuff. It's just the debt that I feel like is a big hole for me personally. I feel like I needed like an education on debt and, because it may I know it's gonna have a big impact on your decision-making, obviously, but it'd be helpful to understand that, like, as you're looking at all these projects, like where we are in the debt world. I'm gonna keep asking.
can I throw something out on that?
Never mind. Saved by the teacher.
When, and I understand you do, and,
I am.
yeah, I think this committee is not involved in deciding how it's funded, okay? The question is, the submittal form should have how it should be funded. They will come up with funding sources. And the thing, FinCom's really involved with this debt schedule,
Right.
because they're dealing a lot with operating debt and so forth, correct?
Yeah, and I agree, we've talked about this, needing some training on this whole debt.
Right.
FinCom needs it too.
Yeah, I mean,
The whole group needs it.
Administrators need it too.
No, yeah, that's but I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, Martha and I agree on that, yeah.
Well, if I could, the question couldn't be more timely. Do you get City in Town? Do you get those updates? Because we got one today. I don't know if you get those from DLS.
I just signed up for them today.
Okay, yeah. So DLS does, it's online now, I do miss the newsletter, but publication they call City in Town. And this month's edition, I think, because I think it's monthly, talks about exactly that. They have new materials on municipal debt. And so recognizing that your colleagues on my right have the benefit of the Mass Municipal Finance Committee Association, I think, through MMA. I don't know that there's a capital outlay committee, but I'd be more than happy to share through the chair, however you want, all of those. DLS has rebranded themselves, but they've reinvigorated their training offerings where they use YouTube and PowerPoint and things like that. So I'm excited because what you just talked about literally just came into my inbox this morning, and that's the topic of the month.
Yeah.
So I'd be more than happy to share that with you folks, because the chair is correct, you know, decision-making on all of
And I
that,
totally agree with that, I get that.
notwithstanding, it's still helpful for everybody. I mean, I love reading that stuff,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
love learning.
And I used to be on the other side buying these pieces of debt, so I'm
Sure,
interested in how,
sure,
from that
absolutely.
perspective, just an interest of mine.
Maybe when you get your feet on the ground
Yeah.
and ready to talk.
Let her find a lady.
said
They're on the ground.
Said when, if, how's that?
No, when?
When, and you're comfortable enough, perhaps we can have a tutoring session or a session where FinCom, this committee, gets in a room and has a 2-hour overview of what debt, what long-term debt, short-term debt, and debt means. And and we can talk about how it affects FinCom, how it affects us. And the Board of Selectmen should be invited, because they're always concerned about squeezing debt into a time. So when you're squeezing 40 years of wastewater
Right,
into
that's where it's at.
20 years of, I mean, that's the elephant in the room.
Right, right, right,
When
right.
you're doing 40 to 20, and you're trying to keep, you know, the old saying is keep debt level.
Right.
Well, you're not gonna keep debt level if this chunk has to be squeezed into this amount of time instead of that amount of time.
Right, right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just to follow on that, you know, I think what the essence of your question gets, or your comment gets to, is training and education. And so I believe you all know that the town is hosting KP Law next week for a primer on open meeting law. Which is long overdue. I don't know when the last time the town sponsored that, and so the board has directed me, and even if not, you know, that's part of my goals and objectives, is to increase educational opportunities. And so first we start with open meeting law, because it's the most regulated and really a critical piece in the Commonwealth. But beyond that, we can do other trainings or other opportunities. So we'll be rolling out more in that regard.
Yeah, and if you have things to read.
Because it just helps everybody.
Awesome,
Great.
Sure.
yeah.
But for what it's worth, and I think Anne Marie just said it as well, if you go on to mass.gov and you search for a city/town, anyone can subscribe to that, and I highly recommend it. That's a resource that I've been relying upon since 1989, when I was a young fledgling school committee member, and it has been an incredible resource. And I think they're really getting so much better and more robust with their training offerings, and they're leveraging new technologies too. So I definitely recommend that.
Okay. Do you want to skip to the second step now? Or have we?
I feel as though I've covered everything I wanted to cover with the
Okay,
second
well,
item.
we don't, under new business, and I wanted to discuss and put it on the record, or what's the vote here to continue on our normal September? I mean, question,
Sure.
what does August mean to us? Do we have any reason to meet in August?
So, first, it's an excellent question. I would not answer that other than, you know, you folks talking in my presence. Yes, there's a deliverable of an influx of data that's not coming until the end of August. But if you folks have an occasion to meet in August and there's something that you want me and/or Anne Marie to present you with, we stand ready to meet that. If you want to hold off until the fall schedule starting early in September, I wouldn't object to that either. But I think that's a discussion amongst the five of you
Is,
at this moment.
is the potential special town meeting relevant to this conversation?
Thank you for that. That was going to be one of my
What's the
closing
agenda?
remarks.
We don't know what the agenda is, so depending on the agenda, we might need to meet, right?
I don't know yet, and I don't want to jump the gun, meaning I have a formal presentation to the Board of Selectmen on Monday, the 25th, about that topic. We do know that the Secretary of Elementary and, Elementary and Secondary Education has approved the Monomoy Regional Agreement, which means, and I'll look to you to educate me better on the phrases that I use, but the so-called surplus that we're anticipating for Harwich only has to be dealt with, for lack of a better phrase. We may have to rely upon special town meeting to do that. We may have to rely upon special town meeting for some wastewater-related activities. But based on recent information I got, that's actually still in flux. So I'll be presenting to the board Monday evening about that. The only other item that I recall, and it is the latest in a series of self-flogging that I'm going through, if you may recall, the fiscal year '23 had a capital item related to Brooks Academy, and it was to fund the project manager, owner's project manager, OPM, which is required under the procurement laws when you have a public construction project of some sort
Yeah.
that exceeds $1 million. We had anticipated funding that OPM contract of about $250,000 through free cash, but somebody inadvertently left an article out from that, so we didn't do that. Now, I'm not at liberty to disclose who was responsible for that article that was not submitted, but we may need to do that at a special town meeting. However, if the major items are not there for a special town meeting, then I would just have to find another way to deal with that matter. That's the only thing that I can conceive of presently that may somewhat relate to capital outlay, but it remains to be seen until after the board meets next week.
Joe, let me ask you a question. The September start date for this are you ready? You know, we're working together here.
Mhm.
We can't meet unless we sort of know what topics we're gonna discuss.
Mhm.
And they're certainly gonna be generated from the two of you. And you have mentioned really to start kickoff September.
Mhm.
Okay, and you're ready to gather us to do whatever we have to do. I would suggest that if something comes up, excuse me, ad hoc, we get together in August. You know, it's, like I said, this is the first year we're meeting in July and June. We normally we go into hiatus from the end of town meeting
Right.
to September. And normally the town manager, town administrator calls us all together. Hopefully there'll be 7 by then. Calls us so that we can start working. We'll have something to work with, and that we're not rehashing stuff that we've discussed that has no end, but just as a discussion point. This is not a strategic group, it's a tactical group. And being tactical, we have a goal to meet, and we have goals to meet within a time frame. So to waste our time to discuss things doesn't make sense to me. And I'm one to say, we know what the 8/31 dead date, that's really a work item for us, is what are the requests? And we can work with Joe at looking at the requests and starting to understand them, bring them in, understand, and if we want to take a vote at the end of whatever the presentation is, fine. But we sort of need some information from that table, like how much do we have to do funding with? Pretty simple.
Yeah.
If we have 40 requests, and again, $40 million, and we only got 20, say la vie, what do you got?
So if we start our Friday meetings in September, the 2nd is right before Labor Day, so we're not gonna do that, that's a Friday. The 9th, should we shoot for the 9th to get together with you, Joe? And
That's what I would request, that's exactly what I was gonna suggest, is if you look at September 9th as the first substantive meeting that you can have relative to preliminary applications, and that also gives you from September 9th to December 12th,
Right.
you know, to really get into that process ahead of the joint meeting. I think that's the way to go.
We also have to figure out, and we'll figure out as we see the workload, Friday, Karen, what time did we?
We
pick?
talked about 10 o'clock on Fridays,
10 o'clock on Fridays?
and then filling in extra days or
That's the
walkthroughs
point,
or,
that's the
like,
point I was
if there's a
bringing.
big project or something somewhere, let's do a show and tell that makes sense. We can set those up as it makes sense for the department heads.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about Fridays. Are we talking about every Friday? Are we talking about
Yeah,
every
I-
other Friday?
I put it on every Friday and then cancel if we don't need it.
Can you live with that?
Absolutely. I think what we're talking about, to meet the overall directive of the board and everyone's desire to get this done well in advance, December 12th is not well in advance. So I think weekly is helpful. What I wanted to just respond to what Karen said is, and also remember that site visits are recommended and allowed and not public meetings. They've updated, when I say they, the legislature 12 years ago, but updated the open meeting law whereby you could use one of those Friday sessions if it works jointly to do site visits as well. So I think committing to a weekly Friday calendar, starting September 9th, and deciding on
Yeah.
whether it's a meeting, whether it's a site visit, whether it's a cancellation is the way to go.
So a site visit's not a meeting.
Correct. Site visit is not a required meeting under the open meeting law, so long as you do not deliberate at it. And as we've done for the first site visit for 204 Sisson Road, what I would encourage is that you follow a site visit with a deliberation action on your next agenda. And that way you really cover the intent of the open meeting law.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Any,
So our next meeting is September 9th.
unless
I'm good with that.
something happens that, the bylaw charter committee comes to us and says, this has to be addressed. I've got to say that they were very open with Joe and myself, having us attend their meeting and having us provide some input into their decision-making process. And that is in regard to the issue of $50,000. The solid number of 50,000.
No more, no less?
And I am still confused, and I don't know if we make it a discussion point in September or whatever. I am still not understanding or comfortable with if there are outlying numbers in the 5-year plan, and one number has to be changed. What is the process? How does it affect us? And how does it affect town meeting? And I'm just,
I agree.
I'm just drawing a blank in terms of, I can understand the chairperson's history of being a selectman or select person, but the fact is, we spend weeks or months developing a capital plan. And we talk about the capital, remember, the capital budget is the year that we're really funding, and the plan is the 4 years plus. And if I affect the 4th year of a 5-year plan, and we work on the assumption that we change the number, and we go to town meeting, and we don't get whatever the vote, if there's a vote involved, and the vote is no, well, that changes everything. Do we have to come back, verbally redo the plan? I'm at a loss on where do you do it how do you spin on a dime? How do you change something that's $14 million to $16 million, okay? Or, I've gone through it about 10 years ago, where the night of town meeting, it's not on the plan, and somebody wants $1 million. And it's not on there, and yet we're voting somebody has to explain it to me, black and white, how they perceive this process to work. And if you guys understand it really well, God bless you. I don't. So, I don't know if we can get a better answer on that, but that's my take on something that I'd really like to understand before we vote any plan by December, is to say, you know, of the 5-year plan, I don't know, 30 categories. It's my bookie. 30 categories, and, you know, you got 30 categories for 5 years, so you got like 1,500 or 150 numbers going across, and we change one, which changes everything. What do we do that night to understand it?
So a little bit to Rich's point, and maybe something we consider and put on a future agenda item is, do we want to, and without making it complicated, think about presenting the budget in a little bit of a different way, in that there's sort of, in my mind, there's like ongoing things, and then there's sort of one, like I would think the sewer is like a one-time thing, and then once it's installed, the maintenance and upkeep is like an ongoing thing. Does it make it more palatable to understand why that one-time thing can change a lot, right? Like it just did, it's going to. I don't know, I just feel like those are kind of things, those one-time sort of things are just less controllable, if you will.
Well, I'm concerned, for instance, the fire department. They put in a truck in the 3rd year, and it's $1.2 million. And they've come out with numbers like that, $1.2 million. Well, we've never really, you know, it's there. We assume that the 1.2 is good. But with the supply chain, you know, all the reasons why numbers change today, and inflation, it goes to 1.7.
Right.
It's gone up $500,000.
Right.
Well, that's substantial. And if I understand what is trying to be done by the bylaw change, or the whatever change, to the capital outlay plan, that change has to be voted upon,
That specific change or the whole plan?
the change.
Just that one?
So governance-wise, any change to a home rule charter requires 2 efforts that traditionally in Harwich have occurred on 2 consecutive years. So first, it would be an annual town meeting saying that, yes, we agree that these proposed charter changes should go to the voters. So town meeting acting as a legislature, sending something to the ballot box. It's the same group of people, but that's the process. So in Harwich, we've typically done that as an annual town meeting, and then the following year, annual town election. And then it does not go into effect until after the annual town election. The intervening action of what's proposed at town meeting has to be approved by the Attorney General's office. They generally take about 2 weeks, and what they look at is say, there's nothing here that would cause us to say it's illegal. But as a rule, home rule charter changes require 2 consecutive years.
So we have to live with this for a number of years.
So theoretically, we're talking about charter changes that would be in effect, that would impact upon the calendar year 2025 annual town meeting.
But I think I'm not putting words in your mouth, okay, but from a number standpoint, the issue is, how does that change work? In other words, if that fire engine or that whatever the truck is $1.5 million, and it goes to $1 million, it changes. Last year it showed in the 4th year. This year it goes to the 3rd year, and it went from 1.5 to 1.7. Does that number have to be voted on separately? That one item, that one asset, that one capital expenditure have to be voted upon at town meeting, 2/3 vote? Or,
So the way that I sort of re-engineer questions of that sort is what we're talking about at its end result is a motion at town meeting relative to an article. And so questions of that nature, we rely upon town council, but in that instance, council is giving guidance to the moderator to determine the action. part of that, before that whole thing gets into we've got a lot of elephants in this room. The other elephant in the room, and it's something that the Bylaw Charter Review Committee brought up at their last meeting in my presence, is, so who's responsible for the charter? Well, the very quick, short answer is, the charter is a governance document that the executive agent, Board of Selectmen, are responsible for. If they are aware of somebody violating provisions of the charter, they could take action. What's not known is what the action is. There's no penalties, there's no crime. But really, the more salient question that I think that Bylaw Charter Review, as this standalone entity, has been looking at is who watches the watchers? If questions of interpretation are left to the executive branch, the Board of Selectmen, what happens if someone who disagrees with their interpretation? And that's where it really gets muddy.
I got a question. Second.
Yeah, of course.
We have just finished a 5-year plan. And if we have that as a starting point, okay, we will see numbers there. And the question I have for you, and they were considered to me the out years that make the plan beyond the budget year. So 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that gonna be our starting point? If any of those change, the 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers that have been submitted and that have been approved, okay? Are they the starting point for any changes that this year's plan is going to make? And do we have to worry about changing what was approved to this year? Did I lose you?
No, not at all. I'm waiting to see if your
I-
membership is reacting before I respond.
I get it. I don't think we have to, if my least understand, I don't think we have to worry about 2 to 5, because those would get addressed as changes in the next planning cycle. Like, right, it shouldn't affect this year, in my opinion. The current budget now, if we go and get the current budget, capital budget approved at 10 million bucks or whatever, and all of a sudden they get these firm estimates and it comes in at 15, I have more of a concern about that, like the current year,
Which is how a normal budget planning process would
Like,
work.
I
But
wouldn't worry
based on
about the
these
out
rules,
years.
it doesn't appear to be, because interestingly enough, and I will not name the person, a person who was on this committee before said to me, well, your job should be easy this year because all you have to do is add year 6, which is your new year 5. Like, they honestly believe that nothing changes, so you already have your budget determined
you have
right
to
now.
validate those numbers every year, in my opinion. Like,
My
in
interpretation,
my world, anyway.
for being here for a while, okay, literally an hour and a half. But my interpretation is that the requests we see, again, the number that are accepted and voted upon by us become first place, become the budget,
Yeah,
become the budget for the year.
Yeah.
The 40 or 20 that have been approved.
Yeah.
Okay? If they have, and you have on this form, out years. Okay, you got 25, 26, 27, they're gonna fill that out. Okay, so if it's not a one-shot deal, it's gonna go into future years. The question I have is, the current plan that we're living under that was approved has out years.
Right.
If this changes an out year number, is it okay? Or
not in my opinion.
is there a vote? I'm really lost. This is just like a
So
a curveball that I hadn't
What do you
anticipated.
think, Joe?
The primary charter directive that I take requires that the town administrator must develop a capital outlay program plan that covers 5 fiscal years, that right now says a capital item is 50,000, and it says presently that any change requires a 2/3 majority vote. So I say, okay, I build a plan every year,
Yeah.
and I work with you folks
And
on
you
it.
validate every year.
Absolutely, and everything that we're talking
Regardless of what
about.
was given to you last year.
Say again?
Regardless of what was approved this
Correct.
year, next year,
Correct.
you want to validate all 5 years.
Correct.
But it
So-
may be a presentation thing where you have to, you know, have a category that says, we changed this, it moved, we added this, we
Oh,
subtracted that,
We'll have to explain
like
it
to
for sure.
reconcile it back to what was approved last year.
So,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Bob, go ahead.
Well, I'm getting a little confused about the two-thirds stuff,
Yeah.
okay? Are you talking about the current, a current fiscal year where all of a sudden, hey, listen, that fire truck has gone up $400,000, but the appropriation that in this current fiscal year is we have to change, it can only be approved by a two-thirds vote? Or are we talking about years down the road that number changes, that is a two-thirds vote? Because to me, common sense would say, you have to go to the next year, you know, year two of the plan that was adopted last year, all of a sudden falls into year one.
Right.
Okay, and if those numbers change, then, you know, then town meeting has to absorb the reasoning for it, and then they're gonna say yes or no eventually, whether that money should be adopted.
How would that be
is that,
addressed, Joe, if the current
so,
budget?
two-thirds, is that down the road, the out years, or is it the year?
Or is it a town meeting? My issue is, does it happen at town meeting when somebody views, hey, last year, we saw this as 1.4, now we see it at 1.7. At that moment, does it take a two-thirds vote to approve the 1.7? Real simple.
sure, it's never been tested, quite honestly, and that's what I've said to
Allowed.
that's what I've said to the bylaw charter review.
Okay.
You know, we are appropriately fixated on a change to the charter that went from a straight majority to a supermajority. And those are the nerdy words that I use as a parliamentarian that I'll never get away from, because that's what's happening. You're saying the majority of town meeting can decide this. We're now saying that if it's going to be decided and it's a change, an amendment, it is a supermajority. So right away, that puts things in doubt or jeopardy. Having said that, that element, that new part of the charter, which was blessed by the Attorney General as not being illegal, has never been tested. And the test of it would simply be a dispute either ahead of or at town meeting. And so I remind everybody that we are in the federalist form of government that goes from the federal government to the state government to local. And we know from elementary or middle school that we've got the three branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Well, the judiciary does not exist at the local level. You only have the executive and the legislative. And so when you have these tests of, you know, judicial matter, for lack of a better word, the short answer is it's going to be left to the moderator if it's a question at town meeting, or it's going to be left to the board acting through their attorney, Board of Selectmen, as the executive agent. And I say all that because we can continue down that, and this is not to minimize what you all are talking about. I completely understand where you folks are coming from, and I've heard the phrase normal, and we know that nothing about municipal government and or municipal finance is normal. You know, it does not relate to the quote real world. And, you know, questions of current year, next year, last year, whatever, all being said, I continue to go back to our present charter, and for the last however many years, has always said that a capital outlay item is $50,000. It has never said less than, equal to, more than, at least, any way that we could subjectify that, if I can say that word. No one has batted an eye, mercifully and thankfully, of, well, wait a second, all of these requests are more than $50,000, and the charter says. So the words aside, now, having said that, as a parliamentarian-based municipal employee, it is very disconcerting to me that our governing docs are in such disarray. Charters are meant to be small, nimble, and thoughtful. And they're then supposed to be supported more often than not by a general bylaw. And then any instance that's different, we say, what does the state law say? So I get all of where you're coming from, and what I try to do to keep my sanity is say, when we talk about current year, let me no longer say I assume. Let me put it out there. For me, current year means fiscal year 2023. We are now in the expenditure phase of that part of the capital plan as evidenced by town meeting in May and with the passage of our Happy New Year, July 1st. So current year is fiscal year 23. If a question comes up on an appropriation, I turn to my colleague and say, hey, we anticipated to buy this apparatus in fiscal year 23, and here's the appropriation, and now we're finding out through our procurement process, it's insufficient. Don't answer right now. We would then say, what are our options? And so I would report out to the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Because procurement results in a contract, and it's either gonna be executed by me or the board. So we have an internal process that the board has wonderfully re-endorsed back in July 11th, where we're crushing it on procurement. So we're gonna rely upon, do we have the funding, other sources? So that's what happens if a current fiscal year item on capital exceeds appropriation. We're gonna, quote, figure it out. To the question of fiscal year 24, which for your purposes becomes the new year one, if those change, they're gonna change. We're gonna talk about it, we're gonna take it up. I'm gonna continue to talk to council, the board, finance committee, capital, the moderator, everybody, and say, let's think about how this is gonna play out at town meeting.
But
And
each
then-
of those items gets approved in a warrant at town meeting, so you're kind of covered there,
Theoretically,
right?
correct. Theoretically, we're kind of
That's
covered
my
there.
thinking.
Yep. And last but not least, the point of, so what's really gonna change? It's the one item we've never envisioned. When I say never, meaning the new 5th year, fiscal year 2028. Having said that, the department heads haven't asked this question yet, so any of them watching, first of all, kudos. Where's my camera? Kudos to watching. Because that question I expect will come up on August 17th. Hey, are we just filling out capital outlay request forms for fiscal year 24? And my response will be, you should be filling out capital request forms for fiscal years 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28. Do not fill one out for 23, and do not fill one out for 29. With the emphasis being the financial assessment that Anne Marie and I need to do for the board sometime in early fall, mid-fall, is here's what we're looking at. Here's the immediate impact that we see impacting upon fiscal year 24, but we're mindful of the outlying years on everything. Remember that the thing that I insisted on is that if we're changing the capital outlay charter documents, and it does comport with DLS's best practice, we want it to be 5 years. 5 years is the magic number, from my perspective, for municipalities. What does capital look like over the next 5 years? What does the operating budget look like over the next 5 years? Knowing, as an example, that we may have a pretty good handle on immediate cost of living adjustments and other contracted items because of the ongoing negotiations that are going on for 3-year contracts. So we're gonna know 3/5 of what we're looking at. Revenue estimates, revenue projections, revenue actuals, things of that nature. So we're looking at it in 5-year chunks, and everything's 5-year chunks. Operating, capital, community preservation, and what have you. So the charter's broken. Everybody knows that. That's the bad news. The good news is we have all of our best political scientists working on it and actively reviewing what's going to happen next. But questions of what happens will eventually get played out working through the quasi-judicial, and that is legal.
Yeah, I would just,
Means.
I would suggest that, so we don't have Anne Marie walk out the door, just raise her hand. I'm out of here, yeah.
I'm going to Mashpee. I would suggest that, this is a work in progress. I can't describe it any other way. We still have people thinking the old thought process in all the capital plans that we've done prior to Joe arriving is that, okay, we put a number to save the space kind of thing, okay? It's a space holder. Just, throw a buck in. that we know something's gonna happen that year and everything. It has become more refined where the buck maybe is $2 now. So, I would suggest that, and I understand where your head is, Joe. It's not where my head is. You have gone back to bylaws and, the legality and so forth and civics. I went to Irish Christian prep school, Jesuit college. We never had civics, okay? If it wasn't theology, it wasn't real, okay? So I would suggest that we stay on course with Joe and the requesters, and that perhaps we can have a copy of last year's capital outlay
Yes.
plan. It's our own internal document, okay? And I suggest not sharing it for the purpose of saying, well, when the requester comes in and he happens to fill out the 5 years on his request form, we do not debate with him or question him, well, last year's capital plan said you had 175,000 in year 3, and this year, that's changed. I don't want to go through that debate. That's his problem. I mean, that's
I
your.
agree. I think you're right on target.
We have it as a work document to understand what that department had requested in year 27, and now it's changed. I don't want to debate, well, it's a bylaw change or whatever change it is. That's a problem for that desk right there to address and somehow have a workaround. I don't want this committee, at least my suggestion is, we don't get involved with that. All I ask for is the old plan with the budget year, and we're gonna see when the request form comes in, if you want a research document or reference document, you got last year's plan. And I know it's in there. That's what I think we should do. And I think we work through it, but we work through it in our own little environment with the experts. And I don't want, at least I do not want to debate it or question it of the requester saying, well, last year you came in here and you used this number.
I have a point on that. I don't want to debate it, but we have to acknowledge it, and we have to talk about it, because if somebody comes in here with a number for next year, let's say. Well, no,
Sorry, Karen.
let's say year one.
Can you say the year number, though?
What's that?
When you say next year?
Yeah, I
You
know,
mean
I was just
fiscal
gonna
year
say that.
24?
So if we're in the planning for FY '24, and somebody comes in with a number of, for the year one, so we're gonna address the budget, the current budget request, we're gonna go into those in details, we all know that. But if they have a year one number was $1 million in this original plan, and now it's $2 million for next year, for year one, I wanna know why. I don't wanna challenge it, I don't wanna debate it, I just want a simple, what changed?
If I may.
That's not the base, but that's not the base year. That's the result of years of changes. So you can't refer to that as the base year.
How can I not? That's the approved plan.
Yeah, but that came from other plans.
I don't care, this is the approved plan.
If it helps, to speak for both of us, that's something that the finance director and I are gonna challenge as well. I'm sorry, challenge isn't the right word.
It's
We're gonna
you wanna
inquire.
know why.
Exactly.
It's a
Because
specific
remember,
one.
through it all, what the charter really says is that the administrator must present a comprehensive budget to the Board of Selectmen, and I forget what the new date is, but, January, call it. And that's me saying, a comprehensive budget is everything.
You have to
It's
answer
everything that ties into the $70+ million. So that's operating, it's capital, it's community preservation, it's retained earnings and enterprise fund, all that stuff that goes in there. And every part of that is, I am required every moment of every day to prioritize. And the only way I can prioritize is by questioning.
Understands.
So what I would try to say is, please take some faith that the way that I've been presenting to department heads, with a goal towards refining everything, is there's gonna be ample information. You may not have to even question that. Information may be provided in advance, either through me or the department heads
Yeah, I
as
was
well.
gonna say, like, this is interesting, because if, in the new, for this year's FY '24 to '28 requests, they're gonna essentially answer those questions by, because they should, to your point, they should be updating all 5 years, not a single year or two, 1 year at the end and one at the beginning. That's not the only, so if they update this, then should be something that reflects them why it changed.
Correct.
I mean, so I don't think I don't wanna over-engineer it or freak out. I think it's more simple than we think.
Well, my point is on something like this, are these forms, if a request was made on that base plan, does that, and there's a change in the out years, does it generate a new request form?
My directive to department heads is to ensure that these forms are completed for anything and everything that's being contemplated. And so I want to be able to tie it back. If you look at fiscal years '24 through '28, and there's a line item, there's a resultant form. So the forms should be updated
Every year.
to reflect current evaluation.
So something that was 23 to 27
'23 wouldn't be there.
in that plan, that's 23,
In this plan, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
okay?
So, yeah,
That's
so
twen-
this should be '24 to '28, you're right.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
If there is a request, there had to be a request for it to be in that warrant,
Correct,
okay?
correct.
If not, and that went from 23 to 27, and we're going to 28. If there is a number change in 26, which shows in here, 26 shows in here, if that 26 number, if the requester knows that the 26 number has changed from what he had submitted last year, does he submit an addendum? Does he submit a capital request to change the 26 number?
So, yes, and one of the new elements that I didn't speak to that is not in the DLS form appears on the capital outlay submittal form between project description and purpose. And that is, was this project submitted in fiscal year '23?
Okay.
And if the answer is yes, was it approved? And so that's the first signal that, okay, we're continuing on, or it's currently there.
Okay, good.
That then causes me to analyze it and say, has anything changed?
Gotcha.
But you didn't ask department heads to do a change budget with a new year 5.
Not
You
yet,
said,
correct.
build it from the bottom up, and then we'll deal with it as we go.
Correct, because, and thank you, because that then gets to, all right, department heads and committee chairs, because again, I'm gonna share that with them now that the calendar's there, there may be some folks in that realm, of, all right, you've given me all the information I need. I need to start building a plan and a framework for you folks to start analyzing and evaluating and assessing.
We'll work with you. We'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
We'll figure it out. We had nothing before, okay? This is probably the best request form we've had, the simplest and the most complex, if
Sure.
there's such a.
I'd love to take pride of authorship, but I stole it from the state.
With your personality, this is you, okay? I think that from where we have been, at one time, it used to be a 7-page form. 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then we've gone through town administrators a lot, and each one has a different flavor or a different interpretation of this form. At one time, there was no form. They came in and just verbalized and put on a piece of paper, I need X, Y, Z, and this is it, here it is, here's my capital, and instead of something like this. So, this is, we've gone a great way, okay? We have a lot of input here, we have a lot of understanding, and we're gonna be working together to get this accomplished and that we all interpret it correctly. You know, so that's where I am. Yes, sir.
If I may, for what are intended to be my closing remarks,
Please.
based on what I've heard this morning. First, thank you to the 5 of you for the meetings that you've had since town meeting. As you've said, it is a deviation from standard operating procedure, but very helpful for me, and I think helpful for you folks as well. I applaud you if you are going to meet next on September 9th, so that you can theoretically rest up for what the fall is going to bring. And I will also continue to work with board members to make sure that when the 5 of you return on September 9th, you're joined by 2 other colleagues, so as you
Great.
really get into it, you're a fully constituted 7-member board as envisioned by the charter and the bylaws, and that you have all the resources and people you need to move with speed for December 12th. But thank you for the effort so far. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. But one of the things that you can have as an agenda item interpretation of what we need on the 9th is how many did you get in? How many request forms you get in?
Yep.
And where do you stand on, you know, what they're asking for, the dollars that you're asking for? Where's the money? What, are we talking debt? You know, how much are we gonna do long-term debt? Is it
If
too
I
early for
could,
that?
I think I can give you everything but an assumption on funding.
Okay,
Meaning I've already blocked off my calendar after August 31st, and it's very helpful for me to have what I would call a tight time frame in response, so that when your meeting gets posted no later than, if I'm doing the dates right, Wednesday the 7th, for your meeting on Friday the 9th, that I would have been able to share with you folks a significant amount of information on Tuesday the 6th.
okay.
But funding, to me, has to be the last element. And I would also offer, I don't know that I could commit, or that we could commit to have funding recommendations on December 12th.
Yeah,
We-
that
we-
changed up to the last.
Say again?
That changed up to the last week in April this year.
Yeah, and not that I'm doing that either, but rather what I'd be talking about is when I release the comprehensive budget in January, that's when we would see the full range of everything we're talking about.
That's fine.
So we'll talk.
Welcome, Anne Marie.
So I hear a motion.
I motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you all.
Aye.
Good luck with your bugs.
Oh, man.